What's up guys, Jake here. In this video, let's explore the possibility of you becoming a tax-free billionaire by investing in your Roth IRA. And we know this is possible because it's been reported that tech mogul Peter Thiel has done it. He's amassed a fortune of over $5 billion, 100% tax-free inside of his Roth IRA as of 2019. It could easily be higher today. If you don't know who Peter Thiel is, he's most famous for investing in PayPal, Facebook, and Palantir. And this was reported in an article by ProPublica, I'll link it down below, and it's titled Lord of the Roths: How Tech Mogul Peter Thiel Turned a Retirement Account for the Middle Class into a $5 billion tax-free piggy bank. So, how did he do it? Let's go over that in today's video. And up front, I want to say that Peter Thiel didn't do anything illegal. When it comes to the tax code, there is no such thing as a tax loophole. There's either what is legal or illegal, and if Congress doesn't want somebody doing it, they can change the tax code to make it illegal. But let's be honest, this is not what Congress intended when they created the Roth IRA. It was meant to be a tax-deferred way for working people to save for retirement. It was never intended for billionaires just to amass billions in a tax-free account. And the Roth IRA was created in 1997 with the passage of the Taxpayer Relief Act, and in 1999, Peter Thiel was 32 years old, and he was one of the founders of PayPal, along with this guy. Maybe you recognize Elon Musk, depending on the share price of Tesla stock. He could be the richest man in the world right now. And in January of 1999, when Peter Thiel purchased his founder's share of PayPal, he only paid 1/10 of 1 cent, so 1/10 of a penny per share, purchasing 1.7 million shares. And his investment, or his stake, was only $1,700. Now, the contribution limit for a Roth IRA in 1999 was only $2,000, and he purchased all of his founder shares of PayPal within his Roth IRA. And what has people saying this is kind of suspicious is that he got these shares so cheap at the time. And being that he worked for the company, he was one of the founders, he knew that they were going to very soon raise millions of dollars in funding, thus increasing the value of these shares immediately. So he got them dirt cheap right before the company raised millions and then was given a higher valuation. So when you're doing private equity deals in an IRA, some people they don't know if this is legit because there is no fair market value for the shares potentially that you're buying in pre-IPO companies. But whatever, he did this like 22 years ago, and PayPal finally IPO'd in 2015. If he had held those 1.7 million shares, they would be worth $483 million today. That is impressive, but not quite the $5 billion that he has accumulated. So how did he do it? And this is where Facebook comes into the equation. This is one of my favorite pictures of Mark Zuckerberg, Eduardo Saverin, Dustin Moskovitz, and Andrew McCullum, the founders of Facebook. Then, in 2004, Peter Thiel met Mark Zuckerberg, a Harvard undergrad who had come to Silicon Valley for the summer to work on growing his company. Peter Thiel was one of the original angel investors who infused $500,000 into Facebook to help it grow in its inception. And he was compensated. He was given Class A or angel share investors in Facebook in 2004. And how did he do it? How did he purchase those shares? He used his Roth IRA. Facebook, when it IPO'd in 2011, had about 1.5 billion shares in existence. At the time, he was a 2.5% owner, meaning he had close to 37 million shares of Facebook when it went public. And if he had just held those 37 million shares, they'd be worth $378 today. Facebook is one of the largest companies in the world now, meaning he'd have a fortune in his Roth IRA of $14 billion. However, he doesn't have this money because Peter Thiel screwed up. When Facebook went public after his lockup agreement expired, he dumped most of his shares of Facebook for whatever reason. Obviously, he wanted to free up capital to start other companies like Palantir. But, as part of a prearranged plan, he sold almost 80% of his stake in Facebook within a few months of the IPO at an average price of $20 per share. Facebook is now trading at $180. That was the time of this article. So he sold his shares of Facebook here when it was $20 a share, and now it's 10 years later, $378. So even someone as successful and smart at investing as Peter Thiel can still make really bad decisions. And obviously he wanted to free up capital and divest from Facebook so he could put more money into Palantir. And Palantir is his recent success story. It IPO'd October 2nd, 2020. And we don't know. This report of $5 billion being in his Roth IRA is from 2019. So he easily could have bought founders shares pre-IPO of Palantir in his Roth IRA, and they've already 10x'd, 20x'd, 30x'd, 100x'd potentially. So how much is in Peter Thiel's Roth IRA? Well, he's not going to tell us, but it easily could be at this time because of Palantir IPOing. It could be over $50 billion. He could someday soon be the richest man in the world. Peter Thiel turns 59.5 in 2027. It's at this point he can take all of the money out if he wants tax-free. I don't think he'll do that because it continues to grow tax-free. He can keep buying and selling, investing early in companies pre-IPO using his Roth IRA because there's nothing preventing him from doing it. So the question you might have is, can you do this? Well, the average American only has about $39,000 in their Roth IRA. The contribution limit, if you're under 50, is $6,000 a year. If you're over 50, it is $7,000 a year. And there's actually income limits on who can contribute to a Roth IRA. In 2021, if your modified adjusted gross income is greater than $140,000 or single, you cannot legally contribute to a Roth IRA. However, there's this thing called the Backdoor Roth IRA. If you want to learn more, I made a video explaining it pretty well. Backdoor Roth IRA, how does it work? There's also the Mega Backdoor Roth IRA if you're interested in that. I'll just give you the quick summary here. What you do is you open a traditional IRA that's empty. You then have your Roth IRA. You contribute $6,000 to the traditional IRA, which is legal if you're a high income earner. You then, the next day, roll that money into the Roth IRA. Because you didn't file your taxes yet, you didn't get the tax savings for contributing to a traditional IRA, and you're allowed to roll over because there's been no capital appreciation in the accounts. So it's still possible if you're wealthy to contribute to a Roth IRA, but once again, this isn't what Congress intended in 1997. So if you have a Roth IRA, can you contribute to private equity? And unfortunately, you're probably not going to be able to. For your broker to allow this and for startups or private companies to want to do business with you, you kind of have to be rich. Sometimes there's a requirement that you earn at least $250,000 a year, you have a net worth of over $1 million. And often with these startups, there's a minimum investment. Peter Thiel had to give Facebook $500,000, meaning if you want to do a private equity deal like that, you have to already have $500,000 in your Roth IRA. For most people, this just isn't attainable. Additionally, private equity deals are very risky. 90% of startups fail. Peter Thiel's investing easily could have gone the other way. In fact, the last 20 years, he probably has done private equity deals in his Roth IRA where he's lost everything. PayPal, Palantir, and Facebook are the exceptions, not the rules. So I think if most people were risking their retirement money, doing private equity deals, most people would probably lose all their money. So what can Congress do to close this tax loophole with the Roth IRA? Now that it's well known, there's no reason not to do it. Every millionaire and billionaire out there who do private equity deals, they should be using their Roth IRA for the tax advantages. Okay, so there's a couple things that Congress can do. The first one is to close the backdoor Roth IRA contribution loophole. if you're a super high income earner, if the intent of the law was to not allow people earning more than $140,000 to contribute money to a Roth IRA, just close this. This seems like an obvious fix, but if their intention is let everyone do it, then let everyone do it. Just change the law. If it's okay for everyone to have a Roth IRA, then fine, it's okay. But they need clarification one way or the other what they want, because the backdoor rule is just silly. Number 2 is to ban the purchase of private equity in an IRA. If the purpose of an IRA is to help ordinary Americans save and invest for retirement, then you don't want them YOLOing on an investment asset that loses 90% of the time. Peter Thiel is the exception, not the rule. So why are they allowing people, if the account is supposed to be for everyday Americans saving for retirement, why are they allowing them to participate in these risky private equity deals? The counter argument to that is there are lots of risky things you can already invest in a IRA, such as real estate or crypto or commodities. Are you just going to blanket ban all of that or just target private equity? I don't really feel like investing in private equity is the problem, given that most people lose most of the time. So the third idea, and this would solve everything, is to limit the tax-free savings in a Roth IRA to a really high number, something that only a reasonable person needs to retire comfortably and get that tax savings. So they can make this $100 million, I don't care. But a nice round number, maybe like 3 million, 4 million, 5 million. If your Roth IRA gets higher than this, then you no longer get tax savings on sales or withdrawals. If it gets above 3 million, 5 million, 100 million, then you're going to have to start paying capital gains on all of your sales. That would immediately close this Roth IRA tax loophole for billionaires. Because once again, we just have to ask the question over and over, what's the purpose of this account? If this purpose of this account is to allow billionaires to just avoid paying taxes or to let ordinary working Americans retire comfortably. Either way, Peter Thiel is a pretty interesting guy. I don't see him going away anytime in the near future, and as his wealth continues to grow, I think we're going to be hearing more and more from this guy in the future. Okay guys, if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up so the algorithm knows it's good. If you have any comments or questions about any of this, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Until the next video, take care.